Are you ready to rumble? Ed Slappy here with another hardcore Nuzlocke, this time of Fighting Type Pokémon only in Pokémon Red. Now, if you've played Pokémon Red, Blue, or Yellow, you know that not all types are created equally. And in Gen 1, 3 types in particular are really the pits. The least bad of these 3 is probably Rock, which, while most of their moves are inaccurate, gets a good enough move in Rock Slide, and tends to have relatively defensive Pokémon who can deal big damage. Next up is probably Bug, which has a couple okay stab moves in Twin Needle and Pin Missile, but most Bugs can't learn either. At least there are a good number of Bug Pokémon early on who can make life a little easier through the first few gyms. But the worst type in my opinion is Fighting. Like Rock, most of their moves are inaccurate, but they're also not very strong. Outside of exactly one Pokemon, which I'll talk about in a minute, the strongest stab attack any fighting type has access to is Submission. An 80 base power, 80% accurate move that does a quarter of recoil damage. Just awful. If you want a slightly better stab move, your only other option is the 50 base power low kick, which isn't even perfectly accurate. On top of that, only one Pokemon line can even learn it until Yellow, where they mercifully gave it to Mankey too. But we're doing Red, so no access to that there. Wouldn't want this challenge to be feasible now, would we? On top of this, there are exactly 5 distinct lines of fighting Pokemon if we consider Hitmonlee and Hitmonchan to be separate Pokemon lines. But because of their acquisition method, we can only get one of those anyways. We also can't get Machamp because of our no trade rule, so that just means I have Machoke and 4 total Pokemon. As a result, even if the fighting type isn't strictly the worst type, it's probably the worst to Nuzlocke with. But let's see how we do here. Before we start, here are the rules of the run. The main ones to know are that I can only catch the first viable encounter in each location, I can't catch duplicates of a line, there are no items in battle outside of held items, battle mode is on set, if a Pokemon faints, it can no longer be used in battle, and there are level caps equal to a gym leader or league member's ace. With that out of the way, let's begin. Now, the first question of the run is which Pokemon to pick as my starter. Mankey is theoretically the first Pokemon I can get, but something that you might not know, or at least I didn't know, is that in Red, unlike in Yellow or the Gen 3 remakes, Mankey cannot be found on Route 22. In fact, you can only find them after Cerulean City. This, along with giving Mankey Low Kick, was a change that the developers made in Pokemon Yellow that was sorely needed. This is the main reason a hardcore Nuzlocke of fighting types only is even feasibly doable in Yellow, and why I wanted to see what it'd be like to do one in Red instead. But as a result, I need a temporary starter I can drop after I catch my Mankey. There are 2 options I'm considering: Mankey and Hitmonlee. I ultimately go with Hitmonlee, but to explain why, I did my first 5 attempts with Mankey. Brock isn't quite impossible to get through with just a Mankey, but you need an obscene amount of luck with just Scratch and Leer. Mankey's got low defense, and Brock's Geodude can hit hard. Mankey does get Karate Chop at level 15 if you manage to get rid of Geodude, but in this game it's a normal move, and while you'd think a high crit move would be good here, it's actually problematic in this battle because you want to abuse Leer on Onix's bide turns, and crits ignore stat changes. This means you're mostly stuck with a 40 base power Scratch. In addition, Onix can lower Mankey's already pitiful defense and trap them with Bind. But defeating Geodude with a Mankey is almost entirely dependent on crits, because Geodude can just regain their defense with Defense Curl after Leer. The odds of you getting enough luck here to even move to the Onix are incredibly low. In my 5 attempts, I got Geodude below half twice before getting KO'd. So essentially, if you're a Nuzlocke purist, this run is impossible because there are no fighting Pokemon before the first gym. And if you're a starter selection purist, or someone who only picks the first available Pokemon as your starter, this run is close to impossible because of how much sheer luck you'd need to beat Brock. But there is one other option: Hitmonlee. Out of all fighting types in Pokemon Red, Hitmonlee is the single best. They are the only ones with a stab fighting type move from the start with Double Kick. In addition, they also get access to Meditate, allowing for an early badge boost. This means I can clear Brock on attempt 6, my first with Hitmonlee, starting 3 levels below the cap. They're also the single best fighting type going forward too, at least from a moves perspective. On top of being the only fighting type with double kick, they also get rolling kick, which acts as a slightly better low kick. Then jump kick and high jump kick, which are probably the two best fighting moves in the game. This means they're set up very well to succeed, for now at least. Now the problem with getting a stab fighting move to start is that it makes Misty kinda tricky. In order to deal with her Starmie though, I've got a backup attack. See, even though Hitmonlee is a kicking Pokemon, they can still steal from their counterpart and learn Mega Punch for some reason. This move is accessible as a TM through only a tiny detour in Mount Moon. As a result, I can just teach it to Hitmonlee, beat Rival 2 with only 2 quick attacks from Pidgeotto doing any damage the whole fight, and then face Misty. This actually takes me an extra attempt, because Misty's Starmie hits hard, especially if you're not prepared. But I quickly make it back, and it's time to fight again. I decide to set up Meditate against Staryu as they use Tackle, which crits! It wasn't that much damage though, so I go for another. But the stupid star crits again to bring Hitmonlee under half. This time with Water Gun. That's a problem, but double kick cleanly KOs at least. Now though, Starmie's in with Hitmonlee close to a third. Misty goes for an X defend for some reason though, so I get a relatively free Mega Punch in that does under half. I'm gonna need some real luck. And Starmie just goes for Tackle, meaning that I can take another so long as it doesn't crit. Or Mega Punch can high roll. A bit of a lucky battle, but it all worked out at least. Staryu critting twice was wild though. But now I can finally catch a Mankey. I actually forgot to get Pokeballs this attempt, so all I have is a Pokeball that doesn't work, and then a Great Ball, which miraculously gets the catch. I named them Scratchy. Say farewell to Hitmonlee for now, everyone! Now, Scratchy is great because they actually have a low enough level to maybe make it to Surge without over-leveling. But the downside to that is that they're going to be really weak in the meantime. This shows up especially with the 2 trainers you have to fight to get into Vermilion, my second major problem of the run. I wipe on both of them actually, getting my attempt counter to 9. Basically, the second one, who I do first, requires you to get good luck with the Raticate's moves, making sure they don't use Hyper Fang or crit. Dig, which I teach Scratchy for Surge, is a 2-hit move here. Thankfully, my second try of this fight went okay. Even though Spearow went for Fury Attack, it only hits twice as 2 Karate Chops take them out. Then, Raticate goes for Tail Whip, meaning that Hyper Fang would probably KO. But then Raticate just goes for Tackle instead. Okay, so that's 1 down. But this trainer isn't the hard one. The first bird catcher is. This is because she has 3 Pidgeys, all of whom are 2 hits with Karate Chop, and each can 4-hit Scratchy. Although Scratchy outspeeds, each Pidgey knows Quick Attack, so we're at risk to those. But they can also lower Scratchy's accuracy with Sand Attack. This means that you need to not be quite obscenely lucky, but definitely need some amount of luck. On my second try, I get this. The first Pidgey uses Gust after Karate Chop does about 3/4, but another KOs. The second uses Quick Attack, but then 2 Karate Chops get the job done. The third Pidgey finally uses Sand Attack, but my last Karate Chop connects for the win, letting me finally move to Vermilion City. I'm just glad it's so easy to get back here quickly in Red and Blue. There's not much to talk about here before my rival, but I'll just add that I decided to give him Charmander as a starter for a couple reasons. Charizard's the only starter Pokemon strong against fighting types, and on top of that, the rivals team with Charizard will also have a Gyarados and Exeggutor. 2 Pokemon who at least in theory are also strong against fighting. In fact, the only Pokemon who doesn't resist fighting attacks on his final team will be his Rhydon. But I don't really need to worry about the endgame quite yet. What I do need to worry about, however, is my rival's Kadabra. Not only is Kadabra really fast, but they also know Confusion, the first psychic move we've seen so far. I don't really have much I can do though, so I have to hope for some luck. Thankfully, while Pidgeotto uses Gust the first turn, they don't use Quick Attack next turn, so I can move on to the Raticate with most of Scratchy's health. Karate Chop does over half here, so after a tackle that doesn't send Scratchy quite to half, another KOs, leveling them up. And perfect timing too, as Kadabra is in now. Hopefully I have enough health to take a Confusion. Or Kadabra just uses Teleport, letting me get a free kill. Works for me. This just leaves Charmeleon, but I can outspeed and one-hit with Dig for the win. A lucky win, but we can move on at least. And now, Surge is a breeze. Admittedly, I get outsped by possibly all of his Pokemon, but I've got an extremely powerful super effective move and he doesn't. Surge starts out with a bad time as his Voltorb misses a Screech before Dig takes them right out. Next, Surge doesn't get any chip off with Pikachu, instead opting for an X-Speed, so Dig gets rid of them too. Last up is Raichu, and wouldn't you know it, Surge goes for an X-Speed here too, completely freeing me from the risk of Thunderbolt as Dig KOs for a clean sweep. And as a reward for an easy win, I finally get to add another member to my team. In Rock Tunnel, I find and catch a Machop I named Choppy. In a short amount of time, both Choppy and Scratchy evolve into Machoke and Primeape respectively, which is essential because I'm about to enter the hardest stretch of gyms for my team. From Erica through Sabrina, these gym leaders have good matchups against fighting types, with resistances and access to powerful special moves. What's even worse is that Choppy just barely got too much experience in Erica's gym. So now they're over the cap, leaving me with just Scratchy. Well, let's see how we can do. I go for Dig on Victory Bell, missing a Poison Powder. But even though Dig crits, Victory Bell's still alive and uses Wrap. Not good. This brings Scratchy to just over half, as all I can do is watch. Finally, they're freed, but I'm nervous for the rest of the battle now. A Karate Chop KOs, bringing in Tangela. Karate Chop looks like it's gonna be a 3-hit, but at least Tangela misses Bind. Next turn, they just use a weak Constrict to bring Scratchy under half. But at least another Karate Chop KOs, leveling Scratchy up. Vileplume's all that's left, but they're terrifying with access to Petal Dance, a move they use as soon as I dig. And apparently it just keeps going in Gen 1, even though it missed, because Vileplume still thrashes and connects when I come up. And even though Scratchy barely survives, I think this is it for this attempt. Dig just didn't do enough. Unless I get a wild damage roll or a crit, I'm sunk. But Dig crit, giving me the win. I'm floored here. I've had a handful of lucky battles, but that might have been my luckiest single turn out there. Exactly what I needed to happen happened, and I can move on. Thank you Gen 1 for tying crits to the speed stat, otherwise I'd have been toast here. But Giovanni gives me a slight reprieve. At this stage of the game, my two fighting types can easily get rid of his whole team. In fact, low kicks from Choppy are basically all we need to knock the Silph Scope out of him. Then, after an easy rival battle, I get the Pokeflute, letting me go south of Lavender to get the Super Rod. Now, I can add another Pokemon to the roster. By heading back to Celadon City, I fish up a Poliwhirl I named Swirly. With the Water Stone, I evolve Swirly into a Poliwrath. Swirly is an important Pokemon because their Water type is the only type that isn't fighting I get access to. So I'm going to be relying on them for extra coverage whenever possible. I actually can also get my final Pokemon of the run now. By heading to Saffron City, I can go to the Fighting Dojo and take on its leader. Swirly can sweep, but it ultimately happens through Hypnosis Lock. And then, after beating the best mono fighting type trainer in the game, you heard me, I'm offered either a Hitmonlee or a Hitmonchan. So, I've given my spiel on Hitmonlee already, but it's the clear best fighting type of the run. In contrast, Hitmonchan is the clear worst, with 0 good moves by level up outside of the decent Mega Punch. Because all the elemental punches are special moves through Gen 3, Hitmonchan just can't really do enough to be useful this run. As a result, I'm taking Hitmonlee again. I name them Kiki Jr. Now my team's complete. And because Koga and Sabrina are at the same level cap, I decide to take Koga on first, a little under-leveled. Thankfully, Scratchy still has Dig on their moveset, but I also got Earthquake from Silph Tower, so I've got options. But actually, I just need Dig. Thanks to it being base 100, it's the best physical move I can use against Koga. With it, I KO Coughing 1, Muck in 2 hits, then the final Coughing, and then Koga uses an X attack on his Weezing as I Dig. Dig doesn't quite KO though, so I go to repeat. And Weezing self-destructs! Absolutely a baffling play by Koga. But thanks to Dig, Scratchy is safe and we've cleanly won a 5th gym badge. But this leaves me with the challenge I've been putting off. My 4th major problem of the run, the 5th rival battle. If we're talking average type effectiveness, this is the hardest battle of the run because he has 5 Pokemon, all but one of whom is fully evolved, and all are either flying or psychic types. I lead with Kiki. Jump Kick does over half to Pidgeot. as Pidgeot uses Wing Attack to do about 40%. Another Jump Kick does the job, though. Now it's Execute, who doesn't have a single damage-dealing move. I use Body Slam, which paralyzes and freezes them up! I don't think it really matters because they'd have just gone for Reflect or Hypnosis anyways, but I can move on a lot faster now. But now, it's the tough stretch as Gyarados comes in. I decide now's time to switch, so I bring in Swirly on a weak bite. Then, I outspeed to land a Hypnosis. I had some wiggle room here, but that was extremely nice, because now I can whittle them down with a few Ice Beams while I mentally prepare for my rival's scariest Pokemon, Alakazam. They outspeed and go for Confusion, which does way more than I'd have liked to see. But with an Earthquake, Alakazam survives on a 5th. This was a roller coaster, and it's not even done yet. I can't depend on any of my Pokemon to cleanly survive another hit. I figure Choppy's my bulkiest left at full health, so I go to them. As my rival heals. At least now I don't need to sack Choppy. Or at least yet, because Alakazam then outspeeds to nail Choppy with a Psybeam. That they survive! This lets me get rid of Alakazam with a Strength to move on to Charizard. Now, my two best Pokemon for taking Charizard on are both well under half. So I instead decide to go into Scratchy as Charizard uses Ember, which crits! But no burn, so now I can fire back with a Karate Chop to do a third as Charizard misses a Leer. One more Karate Chop brings Charizard under half, as they respond with a this time non-critical Ember, and no burn again, so one final Karate Chop gets rid of Charizard for good. And honestly, bless. I don't want to see my rival again for a good long time. And while I don't have to, I do have the hardest gym leader left. Sabrina is a menace. And let me show you why, because this took multiple attempts. The two of those ended on wipes to the bird trainer, and one of those was Rival 5. So much for not seeing him again for a while. Because Sabrina's psychic Pokemon have great special but low defense, you need a Pokemon who's strong and fast. Kiki's the best option for this as a result. Now, Kadabra isn't a threat. A single Body Slam gets rid of them. Mr. Mime survives Body Slams mostly and likes to go for Confusion. And this can hit hard, but mostly isn't a threat. The real problem is Venomoth. Venomoth has access to Psybeam, and a pretty good special stat, meaning they can do a ton of damage after surviving a Body Slam. My first try against Sabrina, Psybeam crits, but even when it doesn't, it's still doing over half. I'm resetting here as soon as I lose a Pokemon because I don't think I can do this run without any of these guys yet. Now, what this all means is that I need luck. The run I win on, Body Slam KOs Kadabra, then gets a crit to KO Mr. Mime, then gives me another incredibly lucky crit on Venomoth, letting me see Alakazam for the first time, who outspeeds, but goes for Psywave. It actually hits kinda hard, all things considered, but this was one of the better outcomes. Body Slam connects though, and Alakazam survives, but gets paralyzed! Alright, perfect. Now I can outspeed, and a final Body Slam gets me the win. One of Sabrina's gym trainers said it takes more than power to beat her, but that's really all I had access to. But let me know in the comments if you saw a better way I could beat Sabrina. I couldn't think of any that didn't involve more luck, but I'm curious what other strategies are out there. Blaine, on the other hand, is much easier. I even can go in underleveled. I actually forgot to heal too, and only realized at the start of the battle. He works a lot like Koga. I lead with Swirly and surf both his Growlithe and Ponyta. Then, I get rid of Rapidash too. All that's left is Arcanine. I decided to switch to Earthquake here for some flavor, but it probably would have been a little cleaner if I didn't. Regardless, Arcanine uses a weak takedown before a second Earthquake gets the KO for the win. And if you think Giovanni's gonna be a problem, you would be sorely mistaken. Swirly's water typing again comes in so clutch, as I just click Surf 5 times to get rid of his whole team. Getting rid of Team Rocket for now. After all that, it's time to fight the rival for the first time since Saffron City, and he's grown a lot stronger. What's nice here, though a little cheap, is that thanks to the league cap being much higher than Giovanni's, I can give my Pokemon a ton of extra levels for protection, getting everyone to 58. Now, let's see how we do. I lead Swirly, who Ice Beams Pidgeot away. Rhyhorn goes down to a Surf, And then Execute falls to another Ice Beam. Gyarados comes in, but I outspeed and hit them with a Hypnosis. Then Ice Beam crits to do about half, but Gyarados wakes up. I'm not sure if it's worth it to Hypnotize again, so I go for Ice Beam instead, which leaves Gyarados on a sliver as the rival uses a potion. It's so funny that he's about to become champion, but only has access to potions. What a joke. But at least one more Ice Beam KOs to bring in Alakazam. The question here is, will Earthquake KO this time? Alakazam outspeeds to use Psybeam, doing under half actually, and Earthquake crits! I guess I won't know for certain, but it definitely helped here. Last up is Charizard, but they're basically an afterthought now as one more Surf gets the job done, letting me get to the league. We'll have to see how that fight goes with more even levels though. But with that, it's a quick jump to the league. Let's see how it goes. Lorelei's up first. Kiki gets rid of her Dugong with a high jump kick. Next, Cloyster's out, but high jump kick leaves them on a sliver. They use Aurora Beam and get an attack drop too. It's not a great idea to stay in now, so even though I get the KO, I swap into Choppy on Slowbro, who just sets up Amnesia. Now, while this could be bad if Slowbro ever attacks, they won't. Because I only have fighting types, Slowbro's just going to go for the Psychic type Amnesia, seeing the super effective matchup. As a result, a few strengths get rid of them. Next, Rock Slide gets rid of Jinx. I go for Low Kick on Lapras, but while it does half, Lapras confuses Choppy. This causes them to hurt themselves. And Lapras follows that up by nailing Choppy with a hard Blizzard. Thankfully, they survive on 9 HP, but this means I have to switch. So I go into Swirly. Lapras can't really do that much damage with Blizzard, and while Earthquake doesn't KO, Lorelei just uses a retroactive Super Potion, letting me get the win next turn. Bruno is a little tougher than the last time I played this game, but only a little. I can just lead with Swirly, who surfs Onix 1 away. Then I put Hitmonchan to sleep before getting rid of them. Then Hitmonlee is the biggest threat, but another Hypnosis and Surf combo drops them too. Onix 2 goes down, and then Machamp can't really do enough to hurt me. After a Surf does over half, they don't even try, opting instead for a Leer. That means that another Surf gets rid of them for an easy win. I'm officially the best fighting trainer in all of Kanto. The Bruno really shouldn't count as a fighting trainer with 2 Onixes. That's so pitiful for the Elite Four. But what's not weak is Agatha. Or well, sorta. See, ghost types should be hard to hit for fighting types, right? But Agatha's really more of a poison trainer, and I've got an easy answer for her. I lead Swirly, who earthquakes her first Gengar into the ground. Next up is Golbat, and here, an Ice Beam doesn't quite get rid of them, so Agatha uses a Super Potion. Fine by me, one more Ice Beam gets the job done, leveling Swirly up. Haunter and Arbok go down to an Earthquake apiece. Agatha's second Gengar does too, but gets a Nightshade in first, preventing me from winning damageless. So actually, this was also kinda easy. Can one of the worst types in the game steamroll here? All I know is that Swirly's doing an amazing job so far, and they're about to continue that in a big way. But not at first. The final Elite Four member is Lance, who also theoretically matches up well against my team. I lead with Choppy, who Rock Slides Lance's Gyarados for over half, but Gyarados just responds with Leer, letting me get an easy KO with another Rock Slide. Next up is his first Dragonair, so not wanting to risk Choppy's lowered defense to a Hyper Beam, I swap to Swirly. As Dragonair goes for Agility. That made sense, but I wanted to just be careful. And Ice Beam doesn't quite KO, as Dragonair uses Agility again. But Lance just heals, giving me a chance to KO again. And this time, Ice Beam gets the job done. Another gets rid of Dragonair number 2. And while Aerodactyl goes for Bite, it does basically nothing, letting me get rid of them with a Surf. Last up is Dragonite. And we don't need to worry at all, because here, an Ice Beam cleanly one-shots for the win. It's just the champion left, the final major problem of my run. I use my remaining rare candies to get my team a few extra levels and head in. Ice Beam doesn't quite KO Pidgeot, who goes for Sky Attack. That at least buys me another turn. So one more gets rid of the bird and brings in the Spoon Lover. Time to find out how much Earthquake does. Except Alakazam outspeeds and uses Psychic, which crits to KO Swirly outright. Okay, well now I'm in a hole. I'm not really thinking straight at this point, so I bring in Choppy thinking of their bulk. And while they survive a Psybeam to get a strength off for about 3/4, Alakazam gets rid of them too the turn after. This means I've lost my best options for Charizard in just 3 turns. I do now what I should have just done in the first place and bring in Scratchy. And Scratchy outspeeds to KO with Karate Chop. Good riddance. Okay, we can finally start making some progress now. Dig easily gets rid of Rhydon before Executor comes in, but they'll exclusively go for Hypnosis because its Red is strong against fighting, so they're free. And they're nice enough to miss both Hypnoses they used to speed this fight along. Somehow, I've made this an even fight. With Gyarados in now, I decide to just go for Thrash as they miss Leer. One more brings them under half as they nail Scratchy with a huge Hyper Beam. One more Thrash gets the KO at least, but this brings Charizard in. Scratchy outspeeds and hits Charizard hard, but Charizard responds with a Fire Blast to KO my starter. All that's left is Kiki Jr. I wanted to end this run deathless, but now they'll have to avenge all my fallen Pokemon. And with one final Body Slam, they outspeed to put Charizard and my rival into the ground for good. And that's how I beat a hardcore Nuzlocke of Pokémon Red using only fighting types. At the start of this challenge, I wondered if it was even possible to beat Pokémon Red using only fighting types. And if you ignore the fact that you can't catch a fighting type until after Misty, then the answer is decisively yes. This was a really fun run that gave me a new appreciation for a type I don't really use a lot. The fighting type definitely had room to grow here, with horrible moves and Pokemon who are strong but not super well optimized. But they each brought their own strengths to this challenge, with each teammate getting at least one okay-ish move I could use to boost my coverage. They're definitely not treated well by Gen 1 though, with both random trainers and gym leaders alike posing huge challenges for them without many options for good coverage. And even though we could never quite do enough against Psychic types, something that really sinks a Gen 1 run, these Pokemon had just enough bulk to mostly survive and eliminate threats. That said, the clear MVP of the run was Swirly the Poliwrath. With a typing as bad as fighting, having good coverage with other moves is pivotal. This was something pretty much only Poliwrath was able to consistently take advantage of, with access to great water, ice, and ground moves, as well as sleep. Their relatively higher special stat also allowed them to take special attacks better than any Pokemon on my team. They weren't necessarily a great attacker, but all that coverage made it almost not matter at all. I don't know that I could have beaten this run nearly as easily if not for them. But that's a wrap. Please feel free to like and subscribe to my channel. If you have any suggestions or things you'd like to see me do, leave a comment, at me on Twitter, or email me with your suggestion at ed40plays@gmail.com. Next up, we're going back to the Banning Half the Pokédex series, this time in Kalos. Catch you all there.